Friends and family, welcome to another live broadcast brought to you by Premier's Turning Point, with your host, Bishop Dr. Uton Lang. We pray and hope that something that is being said today will bless your soul and spirit. Please take a quick moment to like and share this broadcast with your friends and family. Thank you again for joining us. Let's go into our live program.
Blessings, one and all. We're so happy to be back with you on Premier's Turning Point. Of course, I'm Bishop Dr. Uton Lang, and I'm just welcoming one and all for our programming today. We're going to pick back up on where we left off last week. We got a little bit of interruption, but we're going to pick up where we continue talking about race relations and the plight that our country is in, and also what role the church should play in trying to normalize things. So we want everybody to just tune in. Those who are on Facebook, like and share. We also are picking a plea out this week for everybody to join us also on YouTube, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way we can engage you as we go forward. So as usual, we thank God for allowing us to be together this evening. We pray that His blessings will be upon us. He will give us direction, and He will give us the wisdom and knowledge to share, that everybody can be edified. So with that, we say thank you for joining us. We're going to now join our panel, and we're going to introduce them and then move on. And please feel free to put in your questions, and we will be more than happy to answer them. So again, we welcome our panelists, and we're going to go around the room. We'll start with Tatiana Lang. We know she's a recently graduated law student and getting ready for the bar. And then we will move around, and each person just introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to be here this week again with you all to continue the conversation about what the church can do and what we can all do in our communities regarding racism and everything that's going on in the world right now. Like my dad said, I'm recently graduated from law school and getting ready to start my career as a lawyer, but I also was an organizer before law school and have been working on these issues for years now. So happy to continue the conversation.
We're going to go to Mr. Samuel.
Yes, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys again today. Again, my name is Leslie Samuel. I'm the first vice president for the Trenton branch NAACP, and I am also a chairperson for ACTSO here in Trenton. And ACTSO, again, is an acronym for Academic, Cultural, Technological, Scientific Olympics. It's a youth program for high school and middle school youth to help to hone their artistic and academic talents, and to help them to also stay engaged with civics and a lot of the things that are going on in society, in which at some point in time in the near future, they are going to have to face in their lives. So we do spend a lot of time preparing them for that as well. And again, it's a pleasure to be here with the Councilwoman and to be here with Tatiana and also you, Bishop. Thank you.
Blessings, and we thank you. Now, Elsie is going to introduce herself, and then she's going to pick up where we left off last time.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elsie Foster Dublin, Councilwoman in Highland Park. I've been on the council for 20 years, and I oversee the area of public safety, which is huge. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I want to thank Dr. Lang for this opportunity, and my panel colleagues for being here to share a little bit about our perspective on what's going on in Black America. Where I left off last, we were talking about what has happened to us as a people and how disenfranchised we are, and we were never given a fair opportunity to seek self-independence, financial independence, and to show the strength that we really have, because there is always someone there to take opportunities away from us. And that led me to talk about in the early part of the 20th century, when in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we had Black Wall Street. And Black Wall Street was extremely, extremely successful. We had banks, as the world said, Wall Street's homes, cars, businesses. We were self-independent. We had self-independence. We were self-sustaining. And Jim Crow came into play, and Jim Crow was invented to disenfranchise the Black folks at that time. And what that literally did was to come in and to ripped everything that we built through blood, sweat, and tears. That was ripped away from the Black American community that was doing exceptionally well at the time. And the whole idea of coming in and destroying Black Wall Street was to not only disenfranchise, but to demean Black people, to take away what they've worked so hard to accomplish, and to create another level of slavery called Jim Crow, and to burn down a complete city where people had great success and was doing well for themselves. And from that, we can see where that Jim Crow era came in, and the lynching of Black people was on a rise at an all-time high. And it led into where we have the prison system, which is a part of what we have inherited now. That continued to because Black people, Black men in particular, did not have to do anything wrong to be lynched, to be whipped, to be demoralized or imprisoned. And that leads to the current day, modern day prison system that we have, where we have young Black children as young as 13 that are sentenced to life imprisonment. And the prison industry, as it is now, is just a money-making industry as it was back then, because they received free labor, and they were free labor created a whole money churning industry, and we have the same thing today.
Yes, so I see from, and actually I have to study some of that history, but if we see some similarities, is there a lot of similarities between what was happening then and what is happening even now? We can comment on that.
Yeah,
Right.
I can start. So I think it's not very hard to find the similarities. And I would argue that it's not necessary to find similarities. The same exact system is existing today. Slavery was never fully abolished, and our 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution only abolished slavery except for people who are in prison and incarcerated. So slavery literally still exists. And I encourage everyone who is listening to watch The 13th, which is a documentary that's available on Netflix that talks in a lot more detail about the transition from slavery into our mass incarceration system. And if you want to see an example of how those similarities persist today, you can also watch Just Mercy, which is a dramatization film. It's available for free, only for a little while longer, so watch it soon. It's on Amazon Prime, and it describes the death penalty system in the United States and how it has disproportionately affected Black Americans. Again, regardless of guilt, people are being put to death in this country because they are Black. So there's a lot we can say on this topic, but I do encourage everyone who is watching to go those two things. First, the 13th on Netflix, and the second one is Just Mercy, which is on Amazon Prime, if you have it.
Okay. Mr. Samuel, you wanted to comment?
Well, the complete premise of this discussion and a lot of the turmoil that's happening in the world today, like the two previous ladies just spoke about, has its basis with systematic racism and the foundation of systematic racism, which are laws and policies as early as the Constitution. And we think about policing in America. At some point, there was some discussion on the news that suggested that there may not be any type of systematic racism within the police departments or within law enforcement across America. But history tells us that we had slave codes, we had slave patrollers who are your earliest form of policing. They call them slave patrols or patrollers or paddy rollers. And they were organized groups of armed white men who monitored and enforced discipline upon Black slaves, mostly in the US southern states, but this is a practice that still continues to this day. And for one to suggest, for one to believe that there is not an inherent systematic racist society that controls our police departments, our police unions, our court systems, our law systems, it just kind of bothers me a bit when there are folks out there that suggest that systematic racism does not exist. And I think that to overcome centuries of indoctrinating laws, I think maybe what's taking place now, the turmoil, the civil discourse, I think these are things that may have to happen in the magnitude that we see currently, and maybe even at stronger magnitudes, just to interrupt comfort and to compel the attention of those people who may consider or even suggest that systematic racism doesn't exist. I hope that this show that you have will also begin to influence the thoughts and the minds of many in your reach, and then exponentially to those who may have these type of ideals, and just to believe and know that the basis of all of our troubles right now is the foundation that this country was built upon, in which Black people were not even considered a human, 3/5 of a human.
Yep, I think you're also right, and I think right now is what is a time for us to probably explore and see, what is it, how can we bridge this gap, for example, between the African American situation and the policing, what can we do, and I think it's kind of where we have to start to turn our ideas. So let's flip and ask those, see what we can come up with on the panel about just some ideas, how we can go forward.
I guess I can
Um,
speak first. Oh, go ahead, Councilwoman.
no, no,
Go
no.
ahead.
Go right on ahead.
So I think that in order to see brutality, I think we have to have less police in the Black community, period. I think that something that people don't understand is that Black communities have been over policed, meaning, I mean, those of us, we can use our own experiences. I grew up in a suburban town where my family still lives. And when I lived there, it was pretty rare that I would see any police officers at all. Now I live in Newark, New Jersey, and I really can't go outside without seeing a police officer. So the police are here, and they're here. They're supposed to be here to protect us, but they're here, and their presence is leading to more arrests and overrepresentation in the criminal justice system. White communities, suburban communities, more affluent communities have the same rates of crime per amount of people, but the police are not there to arrest someone just for crossing the street. The police are not called in George Floyd's situation if someone is suspected of using a counterfeit $20 bill. And I think that our communities need to consider how we can protect ourselves, and what world we can imagine where we are in charge of our own safety and security, where we have people who understand our problems actually coming when we call. So if we have someone who is undergoing a mental health crisis, somebody can respond who actually how to deal with that, and not just somebody with a gun who is squeamish and scared of Black people. Because if you're squeamish and scared of Black people, it doesn't take anything for you to pull that trigger, regardless of what you know about that person being unarmed, regardless if that person if the 911 call was about a counterfeit bill, or if the 911 call was about being in a park you shouldn't be in, or if the 911 call was about you needing assistance. Police officers are scared of Black people. There's no response other than unnecessary force, which is what we've been seeing.
Hmm. Yep. Elsie, go ahead.
I couldn't agree with you more that in our urban centers and our urban cities that African American communities are over policed, and police are sent in to do the job that social workers should be doing. We need more people that are concerned with our needs and understand our plight. We just spoke about the systemic racism of Black Wall Street and disenfranchised of Black folks. And if we were never given a chance to, when we went out and we created our own destiny, and that was ripped apart from us, and we were always, whatever it was, that it was taken away or we're always held back, it doesn't give us a chance in our own African American communities that we're given a chance to grow and for people to understand who we are. So therefore, there is always an oppressive system put in place. So it's always on our necks. So literally, all the system is always on our necks. And when our people have emotional problems, they are not viewed as emotional problems. I remember years ago, there was a woman called Eleanor Bunkers in New York, and she was mentally ill. And she went to her door, and she had a knife in her hand, and she was shot several times in her apartment in New York. That grieved me. That stayed with me for years, and obviously still stays with me today. And that's if we had a system that we know that this person has some issues, and we had social workers working maybe within the department, and we know, okay, if you went to Eleanor's house, Eleanor has a history of mental illness. So when the call comes in, it could be a welfare check call, not a call to go out and to harm or to do harm, but more so to create counseling opportunities and to have a conversation and talk her down from that ledge, so to speak. Not for a few officers to go to her home, a Black woman with a knife, and the next thing you know, it's a barrage of gunshots. The system have to change. Policemen should not be psychologists. They should not be social workers. They should not be the person that are attending to needs that are not necessarily law enforcement. And I think that's a huge part of the problem. That has to change. So when I hear people saying defund police department, maybe it's not the defunding that they're looking at. They're looking at defund them separate from the paramilitary part of the police department and put social justice workers inside police departments so they can handle some of the problems that, especially in Black and brown communities, that they see. Our people have been disenfranchised for so long, so there's a lack of education. If you look at food disparity, you look in the African American community, and from COVID had shown us that there's a huge food disparity where Black African Americans have died more from COVID-19, and that goes to nutrition. So part of that, when an officer goes out and the child hasn't had a balanced meal all day, and the parents, because they don't have gainful employment, they are stressed out and the weight of the world is crashing down on them. We don't necessarily need a police officer showing up in a paramilitary state of mind. We need someone who is going to try to assess the situation, talk to that person, and find a way to help without having an officer there, gun drawn, and creating more trauma on the situation.
All right. Yep, I hear you. Mr. Samuel, you wanted to add anything to that?
Or I totally agree. Um, there's a historical context when considering the gap between police and the Black American community. And that gap is created by the historical perspective of white America that Black Americans lack ownership in the mainstream of America. And like I said before, since its inception, police departments and just law enforcement in general have been built to protect and serve the interest of white Americans. And that's just a simple fact. They use the Constitution and they use law enforcement guidance. And these things have always been to preserve the policies and the institutions that provide white Americans greater access and opportunities to wealth and prosperity before any person of color. And there's just a couple of ways to break the mindset of white Americans. And one, I believe, is just revising or total business process reengineering. That was my favorite term in college. Rewriting the voluminous number of laws that provide the foundations for the notion of superiority. Also, we need to forcefully integrate Blacks and other people of color into every rank and file of the nation's police and military forces. These things may help to quell the abuses that we as Black people disproportionately are dealt. We have to think about police unions. Police unions across the country have blocked reforms meant to promote transparency and racial equity in law enforcement. Many of these unions have collective bargaining agreements that make it almost virtually impossible for local police departments to punish, much less fire officers. All right, and these type of agreements take away power from your civilian review boards and police internal affair departments. They prevent police chiefs from being able to manage and provide meaningful oversight of those that they're in charge of. We need to educate more, maybe develop programs that educate citizens, just your normal everyday citizens, on policing practices and processes. I think I mentioned that the last time we were here. If citizens were more aware and more informed about the policing processes and practices, we would be able to quickly and matter-of-factly identify police misconduct. We need to hire more individuals from the community into the police department with a goal of at least 45% of the officers coming from the community, and possibly increasing that over time. We need to use polygraph tests or other type of personality tests to help to weed out domestic terrorists and individuals who hold white supremacist thoughts and use their power to abuse those who are less fortunate. We need to get our local elected officials involved, and they need to intervene with those lawbreakers within the police departments who go against policy. See, it's more of a community policing type of direction we need to move into, and with the goal of having the police build relationships with individuals in the community and help to reduce some of the bias if they're in the community a little bit more, if they're participating in collaborative community days like cleanups and community green spaces and gardens and farms. I remember back in the day, the PAL leagues, if there are more PAL leagues, basketball and baseball, maybe some programs to feed students that are dealing with hunger. Community policing, I think, is a great way, a great start to shifting the mindset of police and community and police. There's a way, I think we can have a great equalizer there with community policing. And that's just a few of the things that we could do, I think, to help to bring a little bit of balance to a system that could work if it were used correctly.
Yeah.
I want to
I mean,
add
and I think,
something.
go ahead.
I think that community policing and reforms that seek to deal with the bias that individuals have and deal with the representation in police departments are a good start. But I also think that we have a lot of evidence that when people are put in positions of power, they misuse it. And by positions of power, I mean positions of authority over other individuals. There is nothing you can do to stop that phenomenon itself other than deal with the power imbalance. What I mean by that is we have studies that have shown that, I don't know if people have heard of the Stanford Prison Project, for example, but if you just put people all who are, same race, everything, just say they're all white men, and you give some people the role of prison guard and some people the role of prisoner, people who have the role of prison guard will abuse that power, and they will do things that are entirely out of character for them. And that's not to say that everyone's going to do that, but I think that the police show this on a very large scale. That no matter what race the police officer is, no matter whether they come from the community or not, there's a level of abuse of power that continues to occur, regardless of many of the reforms that we see. And I think that as a country, we're starting to ask very good questions about who it is that we're giving this authority and why they have authority when people have power on our own. We have power, and I think that our communities need to take back that power from authorities that are just using it to kill us, harm us, imprison us, etc. It's it's not something that I'm suggesting will happen in one day or overnight, but I think that the goal has to be bringing that power imbalance into balance so that we don't have some of our citizens becoming officers and thinking that gives them the right to shoot, choke, etc. Citizens that they ordinarily would not do that to. I think that we have to consider what is it about our police departments and our policing in this country that makes people uh, angrier, it makes people more violent, it makes people worse people. What is it about our country? And we know the answer to these questions. It's racism, it's patriarchy, it's a lot of things, and they're big questions, and we're starting to have those discussions. I just think that while we're thinking of these reforms, we should keep the goal in mind of getting rid of the power imbalances in our country, whether it be race, gender, etc. These power imbalances are what are giving some people the feeling that they're invincible and that no matter what they do to other people, they're still going to be okay. So I think that we just have to keep the conversation in context of why people are acting this way.
Yeah, and I think it's all very good, and I hear a lot of good points. The point is, I think what I'm basically hearing, however, with all of the things kept in mind, we have to have a total reform of the what we have right now. We have to rethink, reorganize, and do it. And to speak one a bit to the point Tatiana was making, I think one of the things that we will need also, we need some people with the love of God in their heart, which is going to promote them to love everybody and treat everybody right. Because without that, I mean, I don't care what you do, we're still going to have this mismatch of power, and people are going to try to abuse others unless they have that awareness of God. And I think the passive part of me had to put that in there because I think that is an important point of what we're missing in the whole thing. Because remember, you go back to the final commandment that Jesus gave us: we got to love the Lord and we got to love our neighbor as ourselves. If we can generate that love amongst each other, I think we're going to see a better, thing. And then to piggyback on Elsie's point, I think, and I think we need to kind of clarify this because I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding on the defunding the police. I think a lot of people are hearing it as just cut off. I mean, there's one group who want to just get rid of the police completely, which, I know that. But in general, when people are saying this, we're talking about redirecting the funds, to get the appropriate people involved. For example, we may need more social workers, as we heard before. We may need more people, even the young man that died on the Parkway. I think,
Mhm.
it's not clear yet, but it seems like there was some mental issue involved. And then here we had a young policeman who had no clue, to how to deal with anything, I think. And therefore, we end up the guy getting shot 6 times. I don't know how to, figure it out. So the point is that somebody had a question which kind of tied into this. Well, there's a two, but let me ask the second part of the question. Most times, he was saying is that the police don't even take time to figure out what's going on. So even they get on a situation, they're just trained to just react. So they don't even say, well, what's going on? Is this person disturbed? Is there some issue? So all of a sudden they get there and then the guns are drawn. And I don't know how we can reverse that, but more than reforming everything and making sure that we have the rightful people show up at the rightful time. For example, when you call 911, we know the fire everything comes. You think, whoever gets there first would kind of figure out what is going on, and then figure it out. Now, I also had another question, and this is something that has kind of baffled me, and maybe you all can answer it, or we have to get somebody from the police department. Why is it that in other places, people get shot in the leg, in the arm, and it's not a fatal shooting? Is there any reason, does anybody see why, especially when the black is involved, that they go for the heart?
I think there's an
Because
easy
we
answer to
don't have
that
the right
question.
life.
I think we're all speaking at once, but
Okay, so
I think the
we
easiest
go around. Yeah.
I think the easiest answer to that question is this country is a violent country. I mean, since its inception, we thought it was not we, you and I, but the country thought it was okay to enslave people because of the color of their skin. This country thought it was okay. People who started this country thought it was okay to decimate the indigenous population on this country. This is a inherently violent country, and policing is an inherently violent system in this country. As was talked about earlier, there were no police. I think people don't know this, but we didn't have police departments while they had slavery. When there was slavery, we didn't have police departments in the way that we have them now. Literally, police are only existing because Black people became free and people needed a way to continue to enact violence against Black people and to continue to enslave them and make money off of them. It's inherently violent. And I think people who become police officers become ingrained in that system, whether they plan to or not, whether they, had good intentions of becoming a police officer or not. Once you get to the party and you realize that everyone's dancing, you would look weird if you weren't dancing too. So they join right in the culture of violence and the culture of protecting each other and the culture of just not valuing Black people as people who deserve life, liberty, and everything else that everyone else does. Otherwise, you wouldn't be shooting people in the head over a $20 bill. The heart. You wouldn't be shooting people in the middle of their body if they're running away from you. You wouldn't do any of those things if you were using logic or if you cared about whether that person lived or died. But that's just not what our policing system in this country has ever been about.
LC, I think you wanted to say something on that.
I think that because Black, when you, I think the best way to look at it is, in my perspective, is that we're just not valued. When they see us, we have no value. Um, if you go back to the Central Park Five, when they see us, it was a bunch of young men having a good time, had nothing to do with what happened. But because they were seen as people of no value, they round up the usual suspects. And so when you have a system that is always looking down and always pointing the finger at people who have been disenfranchised and was dragged away from their homeland to come to serve, to be enslaved, to be murdered, to be abused. And the oppressive system still feels, although we say slavery is abolished and it was never meant for us to be free. We were always meant to be serving, and we were always meant to be underling. We were always meant not to be valued, not to think, not to have thoughts, not to have our ideas, but we were always meant to be some group of people that serve. Because at one point we were one third of a man, and then when we proved that we were just as intelligent and even more so in some situations, that was another thing that again that was taken from us. So until they start seeing us as whole, as full partners, nothing is going to change. Let's mention that the 13th Amendment. We talk about the Constitution of the United States, and we were never a part of that. It was written for white men. And until those books on the laws are codified and some changes really go into it and to bring it up into the 21st century, nothing is going to change, because we have to be seen as equal on the same footing. And the laws, we barely have the right to vote. And so if you look at it from those perspectives, what we don't have and what we have through blood, sweat, and tears have clawed out for ourselves to a country that we were dragged here. We did not ask to come. And so again, as Americans, we continue to fight. Everything has been a struggle for us. The right to live, the right to choose, everything is a struggle. I told someone the other day at one of the rallies that I spoke, and I said, my son lived in China for 2.5 years. And on January 17th of this year, when he came home for the holidays, and when the plane landed in Newark, I was nervous. I was scared. And they said, why would you be nervous? You should be happy to see your son. I was overjoyed to see my son. But the fact remained that when that flight touched down in Newark Airport, my son, young black man, dreadlocks wearing, sometimes the pants down past the butt, as all the kids wear the pants now. And he is one of the round up the usual suspect. Where he teaches in China, he's not one of the round up the usual suspect. But as soon as he get off the flight in Newark, I started having heart palpitations, and I started going through, oh my God, he got to make sure his cell phone is right, make sure no one thinks that while it is a cell phone, he's not going to get caught up in driving while black. And all of those emotions came flooding back into me, where when he was not here, be it China, Japan, Jamaica, I did not have to worry. I did not have the same anxieties, the same stress, the same worries like I do when my son comes back to the land of his birth. And that's a huge problem, because we are not seen as equals. When I have seen on many, many, many videos and many occasions, or even a car stop, when you see a car pull over a white person, it's a different type of conversation. It's a different type of interaction. When an African American get pulled over, regardless male or female, the anxiety kicks in for us immediately, and you can see the posture of that officer's body. It's not relaxed, it's rigid, and he immediately has a fear or a bias towards us, not putting us over because, oh, you did something wrong, like he pulled over the white person, you did something wrong, I'm going to reprimand or give a ticket or what have you. His body posture with the white person is completely relaxed, not as tense. But with the black person, you can see the rigidity steps in immediately. And before the ticket or the conversation even starts, it starts off being tense. And that's a huge part of the problem when you're not recognized as humans.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Les?
Yes, being a black man here in America, I am very, very aware of the risk that is involved when interacting or engaging with police officers. I have many friends and acquaintances who are police officers, and some who have raised in the ranks. And one thing about the police, as I mentioned before, is training. And police are actually trained to shoot center mass because this is the area that is most likely to get a clear shot. So often you'll hear the police, "Oh, we don't have time to think. We don't have time to make a decision to shoot someone in the shoulder or the leg or the arm." And another rationale is that, well, if we shoot for the shoulder or the leg or the arm, there's a higher likelihood of missing, and there's a higher likelihood of someone else who is not the intended target to be hit. And these are some of the reasons that they give. So thus they're trained to shoot what they call center mass. And I think the only way to get ahead of that is as a community to forcefully get ourselves involved in community review boards and have access to the training curriculum, which I believe that most police departments, locally, state, and federal, have their guidance on their use of power, use of force, and we need to educate ourselves as citizens on what's required and what's not. And then furthermore, once we educate ourselves as citizens on what's required and what's not in their use of force policies, we need to have a strong look at our communities to see if these type of policies are inherently harmful to our communities. Do we have to use that type of policy? And it appears that some police departments say the chokehold is okay. Some police departments are saying it's not okay. Others are banning it. We need across the board, West Coast to East Coast, North to South, a succinct policy that says certain things are allowed, certain things aren't. And then at a local level, we need the community to look at these policies to see if these actions truly fit our community. And if they don't, then we need to be at our council people's doors. We need to be at our freeholders' doors. We need to be at our state senators' doors. And we need to let them know how we feel about things in one unified voice. And those type of things create change. And you can tell the power is really with the people just by the perception of the protests that are going on nationwide, or should I even say globally. It's causing a lot of people who wouldn't normally think about these things to actually question it. Is this the right way to go? And not just people of color like us, but whites and others are even looking into these policies and saying, admitting, that there needs to be some type of change. And if we're not going to our polling places, if we're not going to our senators and our elected officials' doorsteps and letting them know that we reviewed policy and these type of policies don't seem to fit or align with our community standards, these things will continue to happen every single year, and we'll be in the same place protesting, building shows, talking about it, and it's just a vicious cycle that won't end until we really get involved with the policy part of these things, and as a people start voting together in one unified voice.
Yeah, and actually that kind of ties in with a question somebody said. Someone asked, we had our president and nothing was done. So I guess they're speaking about Obama. We had Obama as president and nothing was done. So, what does my panel think about that? And I think it's a good time to go ahead.
I want to jump in. We had our president and nothing was done. I'm going to take this to where, on the subject that's just brought up, that we need, when we talk about getting involved, we need our people to serve on boards and commissions. there is a woeful lack of people serving on boards and commission. We just don't have. We have vacancies on planning boards, zoning boards, boards of adjustments, all kind of boards within municipal government that we need people to serve, and our people are not at that table. If you're not at that table, someone is making a decision for you. So we need our people to be there, to be a part of the decision-making process. They said we had our president and nothing was done. We had a groundswell of people that came out and voted for President Obama. The following year, no one showed up. So you can he was our president, but we gave him no support because all politics is local. And we needed from school boards, from county clerks, municipal officials, council members, mayors, senators, assembly persons. We needed those people there. Congress, senators, we needed was to make sure that we sent him the support. And people oftentimes look and say, he was there as a Black man, he didn't do anything. Yes. In our Jamaican dialect or curriculum, we could say, you know what? We gave him water in a strainer and expect him to carry it. So we said, okay, we're going to make you president, and we give you a strainer and we pour the water in, but you're supposed to get the water to the destination. It doesn't work. So you can't vote someone in. And I say that all the time here in my town, when there are issues and people say, well, we voted for you. And I said, but you left me. You voted for me. And then it's like, okay, you put me on this island. I am now king, but I have no support. So the vultures at the door, or wherever, who else you want to look at it. And Obama was elected president. The next year, the Senate switched. The next year, the Congress switched. And everything that he did, he had to come up with more than creative ways to turn the economy of the entire United States around pretty much on his own, because he had no support of the Senate and he had no support of the Congress. Virtually no support in Senate, no support in Congress. It's a balancing system. You need people who are going to support the issues that you put forward. We see present day administration, and we see a Senate that is in lockstep with everything the president said. Just the majority of the senators are on the Republican side, and just about everything that the president has put forward, they are in lockstep and in support. From you look at the border issue, putting children in cages, and that's okay, and they voted for that. If you look at where we are with the COVID-19 in the metropolitan areas, New York, New Jersey, we kind of put it under control, and we had to scramble on our own. There was no leadership at the federal level to organize FEMA and to get support out. And we fought tooth and nail to get that done. And guess what happens? COVID-19 have moved on to the southern states, and no one is talking about it because the leadership at the top said, it's done. I'm not talking about it anymore. I'm dismantling the teams that I've put together. And now COVID is raging in southern states where it's mostly going to affect Black and brown people. So to say that Obama was there and he did nothing for us, I could not agree with that statement. He needed support. And that's why someone mentioned about voting. It's critical. Your vote is critical because if you don't vote, you're not supported. And when you don't vote, you have what we currently have. Not only that, I have to plug this in. There's a census this year. And you hear a lot of talk about redlining. You hear a lot of talk about resources not being allocated to the appropriate Black and brown communities. If we don't get counted, you don't get the support. For example, in my town of New Brunswick, I think we're at 78% of the people being counted. In New Brunswick, where it's a Black and brown predominantly community, it's only 39%. So if New Brunswick has 250,000 people living in New Brunswick, I'd say 200,000 living, and only 36% is counted, you're only getting resources for 36%. Period. So your first aid, your fire, your social services, that's going to be cut because it's only 36%. Your school, your free and reduced lunch programs, those are going to be affected. So your vote is critical. You coming out for the census is critical. And when we don't vote, our inactivity to vote, our inability to vote, it affects everything that we do, from the simple fact of your road being repaired or getting a street light.
Yep, I hear you. Okay, others?
I have something to add, but I don't have to go next.
Okay, Les want you to go next.
Um, like I said before, it's a lack of ownership in the Black communities. Um, that's why that statement is made. Um, we got to stop looking at government as some type of mysterious being um, out there in the air that just exerts its will on us. Um, each of us who pay taxes should be actively participating in each level of government, in each tentacle of government. Um, I run the AXO program in Trenton, New Jersey, and one of the civic projects that I have is that I want our students to attend school board meetings. I want our students to attend our city council meetings. I want our students to attend the zoning board meetings. As the councilwoman said, we have to be involved in every level, on every commission, in every committee. We have to be involved. We have to actively participate. I understand the sentiment about federal government and voting for our presidents and things like this, but the power of government is local, and we have to get involved. We have to be active participants 365 days of the year, and we have to unify our voice as one. And when we do those things, change will definitely occur. It cannot not occur. We have to be active. People in government are not two separate things. We are one and the same. Government
Mhm.
is the people is the government. And once we kind of get that through our heads and apply that to our hearts and our actions, we'll begin to exert our own change.
I
Amen.
think I think that voting and participating in local government is particularly essential for law enforcement issues. But the question was about Barack Obama, in particular, being a Black president of the United States of America, and why that didn't solve our problems. And I have a short answer and a long answer, and I'll give the short answer today. So the short answer is no president is going to fix racism by themselves. Black, white, yellow, they're not going to. And I think people of all races need to do the work of understanding racism, white supremacy, and undoing what we all have learned and what we all have been taught to think about ourselves, about our brothers and sisters. And one person being president of the United States who is African American is not going to stop everyone who is hating Black people from hating Black people. As a matter of fact, what we did see from Barack Obama and his family living in the White House is that it encouraged people who were hateful to be more hateful. It encouraged people who are racist to be more racist. And it encouraged the country to elect uh, Donald Trump as our president, who stands especially for racism and white supremacy. So I think that first, we cannot expect any individual president to undo 400 years of everything that we've been going through in this country. But I think that we can expect our elected officials and our presidents to do more than Barack Obama did. I know this is controversial, but this is my opinion. I think that Barack Obama, much like many elite Black individuals, focused a lot on respectability politics and what individuals can do for themselves, which is nice, but not enough on institutionalized racism and institutionalized problems that are systemic, that are in our laws, that are in our healthcare systems, that are in our education systems. I mean, if we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, we too can become president of the United States and not solve racism. So I think we need to worry about solving the deep issues in this country by talking about them bluntly, clearly, forcing people to educate themselves on how we actually got here today, and asking more of our elected officials, federal, local, etc. I think what we're seeing is in Minneapolis, protesters directly confronted their officials. They directly confronted the mayor outside of his house and they asked him, "This is what we want you to do. Are you going to do it? Yes or no?" And you know how politicians are. He doesn't want to answer the question. When they finally got it out of him and he decided he was going to say no to their question, they shamed him. They just said they booed him. It was like hundreds of people booing him, and he just had to walk away until the whole council of Minneapolis decided to side with the protesters and dismantle their police department. And I think we should not be shy of asking exactly what we want from our elected officials. If we wanted to fund our police departments, we should ask for it. If we want to address racism, we should address it. And we shouldn't have to address it by telling people who have been oppressed for 400 years how to act. We should address it by telling the people in power to stop acting that way. I mean, it's not like Black people are deciding we want people to be racist towards us. The people who are being racist towards us are the ones who need to stop. The police departments need to change. The way that our education system works and the kinds of standardized testing that we have needs to change. There's so many things I could list that the government has the power to change that we are just not, feeling strong enough. We're not feeling our power to just ask for it and demand that it actually happen. But I think we're starting to get there.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're starting to get there. And I think one person online had a comment that they believe that Black people in position of power, socially, financially, spiritually, and otherwise should get together and change the system. We have the power and resources to effect change, but Black people need to be not divided. And I think we need to, and I think that's one of the passion I have for the churches. For example, think about it. How many churches we have in the United States? How many so-called Christians we have? Can you imagine if we all got together? We should have one of us as a president. We should have one of us in every office that we have, because we are the people who knows about the love of God, and so we should be sharing that. And I'm telling you, if we can really get together, we can make a difference. And I think I like what people are talking about on the local level. We have to start there, and to effect some kind of change. And that's what's going to, we just had a series in church about the Christ-centered life. It started with you, then it goes to your home, your family, it goes to your church, it goes to your community, then to the nation, then to the world. Listen, we can make a difference if we really stand up for what we believe and really start pushing it out there. And I'm really going to encourage, everybody who's listening, voting is not the only thing, but we're going to have to vote, because if we don't, we're going to have some other knucklehead who's leading the country. And if we don't, we're going to have knuckleheads all over the Congress, and I think, I don't want to get too political, but we have to do something about term limits. There's too many old people that are sitting up in Congress and the Senate that some of them can't even think. They don't remember where their breakfast was, but they're trying to lead the country. And this is one of the things why I think we have so much disparity, because they're just stuck in their ways. And we need to make a change and start to bring about some change in the world. And it is going to start with each and every one of us. And I get really passionate when I get talking about that stuff, because I think it is so important. So anybody can add to that, or we can move to the next topic. But if anybody want to add to that, go ahead.
But you just got to remember that this whole thing is
Mhm.
merely a numbers game. And like Tatiana said, it doesn't matter who's in the presidential
Doesn't matter.
office. Um, People who are elected in a certain position, um, they make decisions based on the number of people who have a like idea, like concept, who take the time to call, to write, and to engage with that elected official. And if only 10% of our population is calling, writing, and engaging with our elected official, the other 90% is going to get their will and their way. So we have to learn to change the tides by being active participants at all levels of government.
And I think just be active. I mean, people are sort of, overwhelmed right now, and I understand that. But outside of when you see people protesting outside, people should be concerned about these issues every day and wondering, what can we do? And the answer is there's always people who are organizing on these issues, like every single day of the year, 365 days of the calendar. There are organizations devoted to doing this work. And if you're sitting around feeling helpless, you can call them and ask them, what can I do today? People are always, when I was an organizer, I was always looking for volunteers. I was always looking for people to staff phone banks. I was always looking for people to call their elected officials. So as even though we might feel hopeless, we have power as individuals, and as a collective we can be even more powerful when we work together. But you have to want to do something in addition to, making Facebook statuses and posting on Twitter. I think many of us need to also get up and go out and do something as well, because as you can see, when you have hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, the government cannot help but pay attention to the issue. Like nobody can pretend this is not an issue, because people in countries around the world got up and went outside during a pandemic to protest. So I think that's just a message to everyone to get up and do something, literally and figuratively.
And
Yep.
when you're active, and when you're active,
Go ahead.
you learn who your representatives are and what they're actually doing. And so a lot of times, um, black and brown communities are taught to vote what they call down the line. And so you'll have five candidates who are part of a Democratic or Republican committee, and you're taught to vote down the line. So no matter who it is, you're voting down that Democratic slate, and you have no idea who you're voting for. So I encourage people to vote, but I encourage people to research and learn who your candidates are and do background checks on your candidates the way that Jobs and other people do background checks on you. Do background checks on your candidates and learn who they are and make intelligent decisions on whether or not you think that this person can actually do the work that they have prescribed to do.
Yep, definitely true. I mean, and I think that is, I think the point is a good point to make, that we have to get involved. You can't stay on the sidelines and expect that you're gonna, effect change. You're also right. You need to know, who you even think. Look at it. The school boards, for example. Let's bring it way, way down. The school boards
Mhm.
decide where all your taxes go. And some of it we have no clue. Who is on the school boards. I'll be honest with you. Even in my town, when I see the name, I'm like, "Who's that?" I do look to figure out something about them, but who have time to say, "Okay, let me research and see who is this person I'm voting for on the school board." And I think we have to get out from under the sheets. We have to take our heads out of the sand, and we have to become aware of what's going on, especially the Christians. And I can talk about them, because I think there's really a need for us to start being involved in the community and involved in the world. I mean, and actually someone had a little kind of crazy question online. Let me see if I can find it. That somebody said okay, what the question was, aren't the Republicans supposed to be the Christian party? Anybody want to chime in on that? Uh, I thought I
I will
would
tell
start.
that person to look at the head of the Republican Party right now and to decide for
Oh,
themselves.
okay, all right. Anybody else?
Yep. This country was founded on Christian values. That's what we hear all the time, that this is a Christian nation and it was founded on Christian values. What Christ were they following? On any Sunday morning, this country is one of the most divided places in the world. So if we're going to say, as Tatiana said, look at the top. I don't need to go into how divided we are on a Sunday morning, that we had this country during the apartheid era that did not support the ANC churches, from the Catholic churches, and all the atrocities that was done to us. This was done by the righteous people of this country, the Christian people of this country. So if that's the argument, I think we all need to examine which God are they serving.
Yeah. Les, you want to say anything on that?
No.
It's okay. It's okay. Well, I guess I will say it. I will say that it's really amazing when you look, and this is why, if you notice, I said so-called Christians. I said that as because you're right. When Christ is about love, Christ is about equality, Christ is about justice for all, and we see what Christ stands for. But then when we look at the churches as an whole, you're right. There's so much division. There's so much, for example, the person asking about this, the Republican Party is the Christ abiding group. I tell you, the only thing that, and it's not even all of them, that you hear they will tout is really this technical right for life for a group that they kind of get all stuck on, and talk, they get on that abortion issue, and that's the only thing that becomes self-righteous, when half of them are doing it anyway, and they become so stuck up and not, and then trying to put everybody else down. But the love of God, if that love of God is within you and you love Christ, then the next thing is to love your neighbor as yourself. And I'm telling you, if you're not abiding by that, in my opinion, you are not a Christian. Period. And I'm done.
I agree with that. And I
Okay?
think that
Amen.
even more than that, I think that anyone who's preaching hate is not Christian.
hmm
If your whole platform is hating somebody because of anything about them, because of their skin color, because of what they are choosing to do, I mean, I don't know where in the Bible Jesus said there's some people that you can hate and some people that you can love. The only thing I saw in the Bible was that we are to love every single person. And I'm personally not registered Republican or Democrat, so for people who are worried about that, don't worry, I'm not partisan. I personally vote for people who I agree with. And either I agree with them or I don't agree with them. Either they are somebody who I would want to lead me, or they're not somebody who I'd want to lead me. And I don't want anyone to lead me whose platform is there are certain people who we can hate, whether they be undocumented immigrants, whether they be Black people, whether they be people who, practice different lifestyles that you agree with. There's nobody who you should be hating, and it should not be your political platform to do so.
hmm Anyone else?
I agree.
Right. So
Um,
I really go ahead, else.
there should be no room for hate if you are following Christ. So if you're a Christian person, there should be no capacity, because God is love. And it doesn't matter what lifestyle. It could be LGBTQ lifestyle. I'll put it right out there, because that's one of the
That's
biggest
all right.
hangups in our Caribbean churches, because certain people should be shunned and certain people should not be shunned. And we need to take a very introspective look at that particular issue. And right to life, when we look at Dr. Lang touched on the abortion issue, and you have people are saying that a woman does not have the right to choose. She always has the right to choose. That's her body. Because I'm going to loop it back to a previous conversation. A woman right to choose is taken away at the age of 13 for whatever situation she got herself into. 13 years down the road or 10 years down the road, there's a system that's set up to make sure that child goes into incarceration and it continues the problem. So would it have been appropriate for her to make a decision when she had a choice? Or is it to benefit the prison system and make other people rich?
Well, and I'm going to leave that for another discussion, just because it's, for me to go into that is going to take the rest of the day. I do have very strong feelings, and again, most Christians probably will go against my feeling, but my feeling is everybody can make their own choice. If somebody chooses to do something wrong, that's their prerogative. That's between them and God. And I'm not going to tell them which decision to make. I will tell them I believe in God, I trust God, that God is love, and why I think they should make that choice. But ultimately, it's for them to make a choice. And I think for us to get, so self-righteous, I'm sure all of us, you can look back sometime along your life, you did something that wasn't so right, and somebody could have just written you off. They could have just, they could have killed you even. If we lived in the old days, all of us be dead because we've been stoned. So thank God that we have grace, and the grace of God is given out to every man, and every man can now make the choice. And we choose. You can choose to serve God, or you can do otherwise. And those people who are proclaiming to be Christians, who are full of hate and full of all of this stuff, I'll see somebody. I won't see you when I go to heaven, is what I could say. And I hope you change before that time comes, because it's time that we get together as one people, and especially if we say we're Christians. We need to break down all the barriers, and those who are protesting to be this just for their own gain. You know what? The Lord is going to deal with you. So I love you anyway, just the same. Any other comments?
I
We
think I
did
just
have
want to
one
say
more.
one more
Go
thing,
ahead. Hmm.
Dad, on this, and it's just that, you know, I'll speak from my own experience having grown up in the church my entire life. I think that the church community um, likes to think of itself as better than everyone else. Likes to think that there's certain kinds of sins that are more acceptable than others, because in judging people you're sinning, but yet we're judging the sins that other people are making. And I just think that fundamentally, in order for us to all grow together, we have to truly love each other, not look for reasons to judge people who are not in the church, who are not Christian. We have to love everyone, and we have to not look at certain sins as, you know, ex- excluding you from our community. Certain sins are, acceptable. All sin is sin, and we all sin
Mhm.
and we all repent, and God loves us anyway. So we have to give people that same grace that God gives to us every single day. And unless we do that, we are not following what we're supposed to be following. So while we're having this conversation about everything that's going on in the world, while we're having this conversation about racism and everything, we have to just keep centered in the fact that it's about love. I mean, my activism has always been about love. There's nobody in this world who is not worthy of my love, God's love, and we have to work together to make sure that everyone is having the same loving experience, being able to live life and being able to make choices and just move forward.
All right. Les, any words from you?
I'll just leave you with this verse. I might have said it last time again. It's Second Chronicles 20:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. And the church is a great platform to educate people. Um, those who attend church, we know that God is love. And once we kind of put those principles together and put those principles into action, I think that, as you said there, Bishop, we can come together under one accord and exert change in this world.
Yep. Amen. Elsie, any last words?
Well, I think we have to remember, I think it's Micah, and it says, what does the Lord require of me, of us? To love mercy, justice, and to walk humbly before God. And we all have to remember that we're all at a place where we need mercy, and we do need justice, and we need to humble ourselves as we endeavor to serve. I got involved in politics because I wanted to be at a place where I can serve. And we all need to take time out to listen to people's needs, to hear what they are saying. And if we do that, then we would be doing the tenets of what God wants us to do.
Amen. And I'm telling you, it's really incumbent upon all of us to share the love of God and to, spread it abroad every day. And because if we're doing that, we're going to make a change. I really think as the people of God, the church must come together. All right. And again, if they don't, then we're just going to have this battle back and forth until the Lord returns. And I think we have an obligation, however, each and every one of us. As a matter of fact, we had a Bible quiz this week, and I think a few people got this question wrong. You should think of each other not just as equal, but you have to think of the other person better than yourself. That's the scripture. The other person, you should think of the person is actually better than you. So if you're thinking that way, you see how you must love them, because you love yourself, and you should even love this person more than you love yourself in essence. And I think that's the thing that we gotta get out. All people should be considered humans and equals, and we don't have to put people down for whatever, even if they're LGBT, whatever they are. We need to love each other as Christ loves us and as Christ loved the church. And I tell you, I really appreciate everybody taking the time to share over the past 2 weeks. I hope we have answered most of the questions that people had. There's a couple of other questions that I think they're getting answered as we go along. And a lot of people want to get into the abortion issue. So we're going to probably have to have a program on that issue, because there's a bunch of stuff about that, which I'm more than happy to talk about, because I'm actually have very strong feelings about everything, that. So I think we will definitely try to get into that at some other time. But again, we thank you. We hope we have done something to kind of maybe help race relations. Hopefully everybody is going to be an activist in terms of looking out for your brother and trying to do something, get into your local government, your local politics, your state politics, your national politics. And we're going to hope that we'll see a different group of people being rising up that's going to take over the country and take over the world. And anybody who don't want to hear me say that, too bad. We're going to take over the country and take over the world. So God bless you all. We thank you. And, we really appreciate it again. Keep moving on. Keep holding strong, every one of you. Stand up in your community and just let us, let the Lord have his way. God bless you. And we thank you. We thank you. Thank you all.
Turning Point family, what an awesome time we just had. To all our first-time guests, we truly appreciate you for joining our live broadcast. We would like to hear from you, so please send us your comments, questions, or testimonies of how this program has impacted your life. Our email address is info@pflmi.org. Finally, if you feel led at any time to give to this ministry, please visit us at pflmi.org and click on the tab for donations. We're looking forward to meeting with you live on next week's program. Have a blessed and prosperous weekend.